Thank you for joining us for Habitat for Humanity CLT Partnerships for Lasting Affordability, co-hosted by the International Center for Community Land Trust, Habitat for Humanity, and Lincoln Institute for Land Policy. I'm Aditi Nair, and we're delighted to have such a diverse and experienced audience, ranging from housing advocates, policymakers to CLT and Habitat staff and board members, as well as anyone passionate about ensuring housing remains affordable for generations to come. Today, we'll explore how community land trusts can help preserve affordability, not just at resale, but by providing ongoing stewardship support to homeowners. We'll walk through the history of the CLT movement in the US and examine the current landscape of affordable housing preservation. Over the next 75 minutes, we'll be hearing from a panel of national and regional leaders who have pioneered these collaborations on the ground. Our goal is simple: to leave you with both inspiration and practical strategies for creating partnerships that truly last. Let's dive in. Here is a welcome message from Enrique Silva, Chief Program Officer at the Lincoln Institute for Land Policy.
Hello, everyone, and greetings from the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy. My name is Enrique Silva, and I'm the Chief Program Officer here at the Lincoln Institute. It's an honor to help open this important conversation on community land trust partnerships and lasting affordability. First, I want to thank our co-organizers, the International Center for Community Land Trusts and Habitat for Humanity International, for convening today's dialogue. This gathering reflects our shared commitment to tackling some of the most pressing challenges in housing today, namely, how to create solutions that are just, equitable, and sustainable, not only in the short term, but across generations. This topic matters now more than ever. Across communities, we're witnessing the painful consequences of displacement, gentrification, and escalating housing costs. Too often, families achieve homeownership only to be priced out later or see affordability lost entirely in the next transaction. It's clear that building homes is not enough. We must also rethink how land is governed and how we ensure affordability endures over time. That's where community land trusts come in as a promising, proven tool to shift that paradigm. CLTs help preserve affordability at resale, foster stewardship, empower residents to have a say in their neighborhoods, and build long-term community resilience. At the Lincoln Institute, we see CLTs as a powerful expression of sound land policy anchored in equity, sustainability, and local control. In our new publication, Preserving Affordable Homeownership, we explore not just why of this work, but the how. And a key finding is this: CLTs become legitimate and scalable when paired with trusted partners like Habitat affiliates. Together, they ensure that homes are not only built, but stewarded so that they serve not just one homeowner, but many over time. Today, you'll hear from panelists who are putting this into practice, showing what it takes to build strong CLT partnerships and what's possible when we align land policy with long-term community stewardship. Our hope for this session is simple but ambitious: that it sparks new partnerships, unlocks new ways of working, and inspires all of us to reimagine what's possible when we treat land and housing not just as assets, but as the foundation of community. Thank you again so much for being here, for taking the time to listen to our panelists and our organizers. Again, thank you. Have a great session, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Enrique, for that important message. With that warm welcome, I would like to introduce and share the policy report published by Lincoln Institute. You'll also see a poll that has popped up on your screen. So go ahead and let us know where you're calling in from and what describes your current role the best. If you can use the QR code on the screen to access the report, and we'll also be sharing it in our follow-up email after the webinar. Thank you, Ben, for popping up that quiz. We'll hold on a minute for you to respond and share the results. We want to know who's attending and share the results of the poll in a minute. So go ahead and use your cursor to respond to the poll. Great. Amazing. So we are hearing from Habitat for Humanity affiliate, CLT practitioners, government, public officials, and research academic students. Thank you, Ben. Thank you for showing those results. Let's move now that we know who's in the room. This is amazing. Thank you for attending. I will be sharing. Oops. Okay. Now that we have the poll results, I'll be introducing John Davis, whom I'm very excited to introduce. John needs no introduction in the CLT movement. John is the founding member of the International Center for Community Land Trust and co-founder of Burlington Associates. He helped author the 1992 federal definition of CLTs and brings decades of experience from organizing CLTs nationally to municipal housing leadership in Burlington, Vermont. He also co-authored the policy report I introduced earlier. John?
Hey, thank you, Aditi. So I am the warm-up act. I am not the main attraction. And here are the 3 tunes I'll be playing before surrendering the stage. Now, how might you ask, am I going to cover so much ground in only 10 minutes? The answer is by playing really fast. That's what warm-up acts do. High tempo. At the International Center for Community Land Trust, we've adopted a generic definition of community land trust. And Assan is the one who suggested that I should start by just introducing the model itself. And this is kind of our generic definition that we use at the center. And you'll see it corresponds to the model's essential features as we know that here in the United States. It corresponds to how the CLT is organized, how the real estate is owned, and the CLT's operational role. Organizationally, community land trusts are nonprofit organizations with accountability to the people the CLT serves. Now, most CLTs are community-based organizations with a membership. Most have a 3-part board representing a diversity of interest, but not all CLTs are structured that way. Most CLTs start from scratch. They exist as freestanding, independent, nonprofit corporations, but an increasing number of community land trusts in the United States are grafted on to an existing organization, including some Habitat for Humanity affiliates. The ownership of the real estate is structured this way. It's 2-party ownership. One party owns the land, another party owns the buildings, and any kind of building. Could be multi-unit, single family, different kinds of types and tenures. And the ground lease is what knits the interest of the landowner and the building owner together. Community land trusts hang on to the land rather than selling it. We lease it rather than sell it because it gives the nonprofit organization and the community through that organization the ability to decide what happens on the land and who it serves. Just as importantly, it enables the community land trust to stand behind those buildings and to ensure that whatever gains in equity last for a very long time. In community land trust, equitable development and sustainable development are 2 sides of the same coin. We never have one without the other. Here's the operational element of the CLT. This is how we operate. May not own the buildings, But as the owner of the land, a community land trust is able to protect the affordability, the condition, and the security of tenure of the people who live in the housing, even though they don't own the housing itself. We refer to this as the three faces of stewardship among community land trusts. Now, this is a rather odd way of thinking about real estate, but it actually has a very long pedigree. In ancient cultural and religious traditions, land is treated, is thought of very differently than the uses, the buildings on the land. And of course, in Canada, United States, South America, where indigenous people lived before the Europeans showed up, the idea of individual ownership of land was just downright strange. There are settlements, experiments, precursors that exist in other countries as well, like the garden cities of England, the Gramton villages of India, ejidos, and so forth. And in each of these examples, each of these kind of settlements, there's one party that owns the land, another party owns the building. In 1968, a pretty extraordinary group of people in Southwest Georgia drew on that pedigree, drew on those traditions to create the blueprint for a new model of tenure that they were to call the Community Land Trust. They also drew on their experience in the cooperative movement in the Deep South. There are a number of organizations that African Americans had organized in rural areas to empower, to help promote equitable development in their communities. And then, of course, most of the people who created new communities came out of the civil rights movement, particularly as it occurred in Albany, Georgia, in Southwest Georgia. The organization that they formed is called New Communities Incorporated. And this was basically the way that organization was described in their founding bylaws. So they were looking at the permanent use, permanent affordability of the land from the very beginning. And they were going to hold onto that land, not sell it off, because they saw that as a platform for the empowerment, for the security of African-American households, African-American farmers who had the temerity to challenge the status quo and want to vote. And they were being forced off the land in the farms around their area. So they really saw the ownership of land as a platform for security and for development. A few miles up the road, there was another social enterprise, another grand experiment, and that was called Koinonia Farm. This was one of the only places in the Deep South at that time where Black folks and white folks could work together, could live together, could worship together. It was a community founded in 1942 by a Baptist minister named Clarence Jordan, with his wife Florence and another couple. And the connection with New Communities is that a number of the people who were the founders, who were laying the groundwork for the creation of New Communities, were also close friends of Clarence Jordan. In 1968, after 30 years of operating, Clarence and the folks at New Communities had sort of reached a moment of crisis where they were looking for a new direction for Koinonia Farm. Clarence invited 12 of his closest advisors to come to Koinonia Farm and think about a new path for Koinonia. Included in that group were Slater King and Bob Swan, who were some of the architects of New Communities, and Clarence Jordan's young friend, Millard Fuller. Out of that conversation with those 12 trusted people, there was a new nonprofit organization created called Koinonia Partners. Millard Fuller stepped forward and said, hey, I would like to be the administrator. I'd like to be the leader of that nonprofit corporation to create affordably priced housing for low and moderate income people in Southwest Georgia. The other nonprofit that was created at exactly the same time was the Fund for Humanity. This is a description at the bottom that Clarence Jordan sent out to Friends of Koinonia on October 21st, 1968, in which he described the Fund for Humanity in words that were very, very similar to the way that the people at New Communities were describing this new model of tenure that they called a community land trust. In fact, I would say that for a while, it looked like Koinonia Partners and New Communities were going to be adopting the same model of tenure. But a year later, Slater King died, the leader of New Communities, and a few months after that, Clarence Jordan had a massive heart attack and died as well. At that point, the leadership of Koinonia Partners fell to Millard, leadership of New Communities fell to Charles Sherrod, and the two movements diverged. Koinonia Partners gave birth to Habitat for Humanity. New Communities was the prototype for this new model of tenure called Community Land Trust. And for 30 years, the Habitat for Humanity movement, the Community Land Trust movement diverged. They really went in separate directions. After the start of the new millennium, they started coming back together. Nobody really planned it that way. The first thing that started happening was local habitat affiliates and local community land trust started working together. If they were in the same service area, they found ways to ally themselves and partner to produce affordable housing and to keep that housing affordable, one homeowner after another. Some of those partnerships were an external alliance where you had an independent CLT, an independent Habitat for affiliate. A number of the other partnerships were Habitat affiliates that were adopting key features of the community land trust and basically operating like a community land trust with an internal program or an internal subsidiary. By 2010, there was a convergence at the national level as well, because Habitat for Humanity International and the National CLT movement drafted a partnership agreement in which the two national organizations agreed to partner over the coming years to providing technical support to each other, attending each other's trainings, and so forth. So from that point on, every time there was a global gathering in Atlanta of Habitat affiliates, you saw presentations, sessions about community land trust and about Habitat and CLTs working together. In 2017, the vice president of Habitat for Humanity International for Canada and the United States, Sue Henderson, commissioned a new shelter report. In that report that was completed at the end of 2017 and then rolled out at the 2017 Global Conference, basically Habitat for Humanity International was giving its endorsement, promoting the idea that Habitat homes could be kept affordable one homeowner after another, whether you used a community land trust or a deed covenant or some other means. Basically, this said for a local affiliate, we're not going to tell you what you have to do, but we are going to tell you if you want to enter into this area of long-term affordability, it's okay. We give you our endorsement and our approval. And then there was the Shared Equity Accelerator, sponsored by Habitat for Humanity, starting in 2021. That's when I was privileged to meet Aditi. And starting with that accelerator, that really started to look at how do we increase the number of affiliates that have embraced this idea of long-term affordability, and how do we increase the number of homes that have stewardship, that prevent the loss of those homes. And of course, coming out of that, Aditi, my colleague Dev, Assan have worked together to create a whole nother set of tools. Now, finally, The other big thing that's happening that I think is helping to foster these partnerships is what I call a seismic shift to municipal policy, where local governments are saying we have fewer resources to invest in affordable housing. We can no longer afford to see those homes, those subsidies leak out as fast as we pour them in. The Lincoln Institute of Land Policy has done a wonderful job of trying to document that trend. And our most recent report that was published last year went out and we talked to 115 community land trusts and a lot of local officials, and we asked kind of a key question. Why is that local municipality supporting the community land trust work? Number one was providing home ownership for people left out of the market. But look at 2, 4, and 6. And this was an interesting embrace by local governments saying, look, the way to close the hole in the leaky bucket is stewardship. And stewardship is what community land trusts do best. And I believe it's what is kind of the glue, the foundation for the partnerships to come between Habitat for Humanity affiliates and local CLTs. Back to you, Aditi.
Thank you so much, John, for that important historical framing and bringing us to the present time with this partnership. Next, we will hear from Assan, Lasting Affordability Manager at Habitat for Humanity International, with expertise across shared equity models, including CLTs, ground leases, and long-term deed restriction. Assan leads efforts to embed permanent affordability across the Habitat network. Assan, over to you.
Aditi, thank you so much. And John, I'll use an analogy, a sports analogy. I couldn't have a better assist, in your presentation. Thanks for going in depth in the history, especially of how Habitat came about. I want to thank everyone for joining. I see a lot of Habitat affiliate members. I see our comrades in the affordable housing work that is growing ever challenging. My presentation today will focus on what Habitat for Humanity International is doing towards lasting affordability. And I'll go a little bit beyond community land trusts. And as John stated, we did a shared equity accelerator in response to our affiliated network. So for those who are not part of the Habitat network, Habitat has about 1,000 affiliates spread across the country. And each one of those affiliates operate independently and try to meet their community needs. We do have a growing supply issue with affordable housing. We know all of us appreciate how challenging it is to create an affordable home. We know that there's been a long-term decline in single-family housing. We know the idea of an entry-level home is becoming very difficult to achieve. 20 years ago, 80% of homes that were sold within the US were at or below the $300,000 price range, and today it's barely in the single digits. The cost of producing an affordable home, from labor to materials, capital, with its interest rates, have just skyrocketed. And this has been a challenge for all of us who work in this space. And so what Habitat looked to do, and we heard very loudly from our affiliates, is how do we not only be creative in producing affordable homes to keep to our mission and serve low to moderate income families and marginalized communities. But once we produce those homes, how do we ensure that we don't lose them to the market within a relatively short time? And some affiliates had long been practicing what we're calling lasting affordability, which are just subsidy preservation models to keep these homes affordable to serve multiple families. And so with that came defining the language of lasting affordability, but also qualifying it, because Habitat affiliates will always have an affordable home and some covenants to keep with an agreement between the buyer and the affiliate. But some of these vary. Some durations of some as short as 5 years, some may go well beyond that. So we wanted to define what lasting affordability meant. And Aditi, if you go to the next slide, please. And so for us, and these are pretty standard, we said, let's start with the duration. It has to be a minimum of 30 years. And some of these durations or terms are determined by state local laws, and will go up to 99 years. But if you had a covenant that was 20 years, for example, or 15 years, we wouldn't qualify that as a lasting affordability or permanent affordability model. And it should also include a resale restriction, using a predetermined resale formula to determine what the selling price will be for a future transaction. Many of our covenants will typically have a shared appreciation model, and we wanted to make sure that these had resale restrictions with a resale formula. Aditi, next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, with lasting affordability, while we're focusing on community land trust, which we think it's an incredible tool to preserve affordability and so many other benefits that John mentioned, I wanted to just share some of the other models that we're focusing on at Habitat for Humanity. And these are ground leases. George kind of alluded to this, similar to community land trust, but different. Deed restrictions or affordable housing covenants that meet those criteria that I shared earlier. The lasting affordability models are not limited to these. We have other models, but the main ones that we see at Habitat as those three. And these are meant to be self-sustaining models. As I said earlier, we work hard to come up with the investment in a form of a subsidy to make the home affordable. And with the resale formula, it's meant to restrict the home each time it's sold to ensure that it stays within an income qualified homeowner, and hopefully they can stay there for as long as they want to. It's their home, or they can then, if they choose to sell, take the proceeds that they get from their shared equity model, and then either go to a market rate home or move on as they wish. Aditi, next slide, please. And so the shared equity accelerator is an example of how Habitat International work, especially with the network. So we can come up with a learning and evidence-based program where we pilot. And a couple of years ago, we started this lasting affordability program, and then scale it as an innovation tool within the Habitat network. And the rest of my presentation will share how Habitat for Humanity has evolved with lasting affordability across our network for the past 3 years. So in 2023, this wasn't when we started lasting affordability. Like I mentioned, and John alluded to, there have been partnerships with community land trusts and other lasting affordability or shared equity models. But as a program, we made this a mission priority to have it as an option. So we're not requiring that every Habitat affiliate use these, but we want to make sure that we build the capacity and therefore affiliates who would like to consider these and want to implement them, to make sure that we support them, but also be a partner for other organizations to share experiences, share resources, to ensure that we're being resourceful for homeownership practitioners, affordable homeownership practitioners who want to consider these models. And so in 2023, when we started, we had, Aditi, if you can go back, please, we had 135 of our affiliates who said they were practicing some of these models. We came up with resources, technical assistance, and capacity building initiatives, and have had tremendous responses from our affiliates to adopt these, and we've seen a 47% growth within the adoption rate of these lasting affordability models. And this is not only limited to Habitat affiliates. We have also been partnering with other organizations. We work with Burlington Associates, and as John mentioned earlier, to develop some of these resources. We've reached out and collaborated with Granted Solutions Network, for example, recently to exhibit at their conference. So we're working to build the capacity within Habitat Network, but also making sure we partner with other affordable housing organizations, institutions in this space. Yes, go ahead, Aditi. And so that 47% growth with about 200 affiliates translates to over 2,000 homes that we know are using these models. I mentioned earlier that we have about 1,000 affiliates within our network. When we did the Pulse survey recently, a couple of months ago, we had a response rate of about 60%. So maybe about 600 of those affiliates responded to these. We may have more than these number of units or affiliates, and over time we'll track it, build capacity more. So we hope this will be a growing trend. Go ahead, Aditi. And what you'll see here, as I mentioned, under lasting affordability, we have 3 different models that we focus on. A majority of those, 73%, use a deed restriction or an affordable housing covenant. So that's 3 out of every 4 of those 2,000 units. The remaining, as you can see on the slide, shows ground lease, about 11% of those, and community land trust, about 16%. And these two, the ground lease and community land trust, are growing mechanisms to ensure that we preserve affordability within the network. One of the things that we're seeing is tremendous partnership, as John alluded to, with both local funding partners that want to preserve their subsidy dollars that they contributed. We've seen the community needs from our affiliates who suggest that they implement these models to preserve affordability. Because what Habitat typically does is, in most cases, we will have a Habitat mortgage and subsidize the homes to make it affordable, and sometimes put a right to first refusal comment there. And if we have an investor who targets these homes and wants to buy them, it puts liquidity pressure on some of these affiliates. So there are different reasons why affiliates are considering using these models. And so we want to work with partners, other organizations, make sure that we build the capacity, learn from best practices from folks who are on this call, and ensure that we continue to be resourceful to our affiliates in scaling up the adoption rate of lasting affordability models, particularly community land trusts. Aditi, go ahead. And this next final slide shows the adoption of these models within the Habitat network. This is coming from the recent survey we did. So as you see, it's spread across the US. And Habitat affiliates know that we have a resource center, that we have a My Habitat page, which is a local intranet that they go to and search lasting affordability, and we're able to see these resources. And we work with partners to ensure that we build and increase the resource offerings and technical assistance to affiliates who would like to consider implementing these models. And I'll pass it on to Aditi and look forward to hearing the panel from our Habitat affiliates. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Assan, for that deep dive into the network. Now to the most special section of this webinar, although I left John and Assan, a discussion between Habitat affiliates and their CLT partners. I'm filled with gratitude to invite Martina Kaufman, Vice President of Home Ownership and Neighborhood Programs, Habitat for Humanity, Portland Region, Megan, who's the Executive Director of Pioneer Valley, Habitat for Humanity, and Darby Swanson, Director of Homeowner and Community Services from Habitat for Humanity, Frederick County. We are also very generously joined by Devika Getches, or we lovingly call her Dev, Executive Director, Housing Land Trust of the North Bay. Devika is a national CLT leader with over 2 decades of experience. Dev has launched dozens of shared equity programs, advises nonprofits and governments, and serves on multiple boards in furthering housing justice. So before we begin, we will have panelists introduce their projects and partnerships with CLT. So I'll pass it over first to Megan.
Thank you, Aditi. My name is Megan McDonough. I'm the executive director here at Pioneer Valley Habitat for Humanity. We are a small Habitat for Humanity affiliate in Western Massachusetts, serving 2 counties full of college towns and rural communities. And we have been at this for over 35 years and mostly do deed restrictions for lasting affordability. For the 10 or so years that I've been here, all of our homes have been permanently protected with lasting affordability mechanisms. The partnership that I want to highlight is a few years ago, we partnered with the Emmeus Community Land Trust when they were a brand new community land trust to build 2 homes on a farmland in one of our college communities. So I'll tell you more about that as we move into the panel discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, Megan. I'll pass it to Martina.
Hi, I'm Martina Kaufman. I'm the Vice President of Homeownership and Neighborhood Programs for Habitat for Humanity Portland region in Portland, Oregon. And the partnership that I'm going to talk about is our partnership with Proud Ground. Proud Ground is the largest community land trust in Portland, Oregon. And we actually sold our very first homes with them in 2003. We developed 8 homes that we sold with them, and then we finalized and made our partnership more official in 2020 and have since sold 160 homes with Proud Ground. And one thing is that a lot of the homes that we sell are using an affordable housing covenant, and the majority of the homes that we sell together are condos. And I'll share more as we get to it.
Thank you, Martina. I'll pass it over to Darby.
Hello, my name is Darby Swanson, and the first thing I wanted to share is that we are the Frederick County, Maryland affiliate. If you don't know where Frederick County, Maryland is, there's a map in front of you. We're in north central Maryland. We're about 45 minutes south. Oh, thank you, Aditi. Southwest of Baltimore, and the same amount of time north and west of Washington, D.C. And we are, in fact, the fastest growing county in Maryland. Our Frederick County Affordable Housing Land Trust was actually the first community land trust registered in Maryland, and it was registered through a collaboration with Frederick County staff and elected officials and the Habitat for Humanity Frederick County affiliate. So we actually, as an affiliate, started the land trust and sourced MPTU and payment in lieu funds from developers in order to buy our first 7 properties, which are all single family homes around the county. Right now, we are working on a 12-unit condominium project. That is the original photo up at the top right. And as we have come to current stages of rehab and renovation on the bottom right, we are no longer in the kind of community and relationship that we had with the county. We are now a single LLC with the land trust and the Habitat affiliate. So we are completely bonded together, which again, you'll hear more about when we get to that point.
Thank you, Darby. Now moving on to the discussion, Martina, as a veteran in this field, my first question is to you. Habitat Portland partners with Proud Ground since 2020, or that's when you made the partnership official, you mentioned. Over the last 25 years, Proud Ground has helped more than 650 families become first-time homeowners. And I hear more than 75% of the households are BIPOC. Could you tell us a bit more about how this partnership has enabled you to address the homeownership gap for first-time home buyers? And I was also curious about the preference policy in Portland and if it overlays with this project.
Yeah, thanks, Aditi. I think so. Our stats at one thing that we have in common, Habitat Portland and Proud Ground, is that we're both working conscientiously to serve households of color. And so we serve about 80 Habitat, the Portland region affiliate serves about 80% households of color, and Proud Ground is about 75%. So we both have that as a priority. I think what makes us able to serve more communities is that before we formalized our partnership with Proud Ground, we were seeing a lot of homes lost to the market. So much subsidy would go into a Habitat home, not just the donations and public subsidy, but also just the volunteer labor, the community support. If you think of all that goes into it. And then we were seeing, as neighborhoods gentrified, we began to see homes being lost to the market. It was sort of like a windfall for one family, and it was great for that one family, but we wouldn't see those homes continue to be affordable. And we'd also began to see that in that way, we were contributing to gentrification when homes turned over. So by working with Proud Ground, we established that as a Habitat affiliate, we do so many different things. We're a developer, we're also a lender. In some respects, we're a social service agency. And we decided that when we were looking at moving to permanent affordability, we decided that we didn't want to also become a land trust. And we were lucky enough that we had this really strong relationship already with Proud Ground because we'd been working with them on joint advocacy around homeownership and closing the homeownership gap. And so we already had a really strong relationship. And so we worked together to really figure out how to formalize our land trust. And what we like is that what works for us is that we know that the stewardship and the resale is going to happen. And no matter what, that home is going to be sold to an income qualified buyer and the subsidy is going to be retained. And we don't have to try to figure out how to buy the home back. So right now we're dealing with homes that we didn't sell through the land trust and that aren't permanently affordable. When one of those homeowners comes to us and prefers to sell to us, because that's often the case, even if they might be out of the restriction, it's very difficult for us to figure out a way to buy those homes back, right? It's too expensive. We can't do it without putting in additional subsidy. Also, we're required to buy it back, own it again, do the rehab, and then try to find an income qualified buyer. With Proud Ground, that can just happen from the seller to another buyer, and we don't have to be involved. We have the choice, so we wrote in the right of repurchase, but we don't have to. And so that just really was the key thing that made us think that this was the move to make in an area, especially in Portland, where the real estate prices have just skyrocketed, and it's become more and more expensive to buy land and to produce housing here.
It's really insightful, Martina. Thank you, especially how you retain subsidy in the homes and how the partnership kind of enables you to steward the homes post-purchase.
Thank you.
Megan, you mentioned you worked with Community Land Trust for 7 years and now use that experience to form a partnership with Amherst Community Land Trust. Something unique here has also been the grassroots volunteer-led effort to develop a proof of concept almost for Amherst CLT. Could you tell us a bit more about it?
Sure. Here in Western Massachusetts, we're very lucky to have a long history of the community land trust movement with land trusts like the Valley Community Land Trust and the Southern Berkshires. And those experiences helped inform my, overall viewpoint about affordability. So when a new land trust formed in Amherst, which is a college town with a lot of housing pressures because of the large student population and soaring prices for the homes in that community, the new Amherst Community Land Trust was really formed by community members who wanted to see the opportunities that they had when they moved to that town, for professors and students and grad students to be able to buy homes and live in the community long term. They were seeing that opportunity disappear and they wanted to see that possibility. So they partnered with a local community farm that had to sell a building lot, found some public investment, but they had never built a home before. And they turned to our local Habitat for Humanity affiliate and said, we have this opportunity to acquire some land through our community partnerships and support from the local municipality, but we have never been a developer. And our local affiliate had 35 years of experience of gathering local community volunteers to build homes. So it was a great way for them to get that first real project. So we worked with the Community Land Trust on making sure that we could get terms into the ground lease that would meet our state restrictions for the affordable housing inventory, that were in our normal deed restrictions. And then we took full responsibility for building 2 homes on Community Land Trust land, knowing that in the long term, those new Habitat homeowners would also become members of Amherst Community Land Trust and have the support of that stewardship for things like land maintenance and things like that. And I think that by partnering 2 grassroots organizations, we got access to land, they got access to housing construction experience, and it also proofed their concept in the community. And now they've been able to get donations of land and houses from other community members who said, this is a real thing. This is happening here in our community.
This is so exciting, Megan. I've spoken to homeowners on your community land trust, and it has changed my perception about relationship with a resident's relationship with a CLT. So thank you for sharing more about the partnership. Derby, you mentioned that creating the Frederick County Affordable Housing Land Trust was not an easy journey. And it is the first community land trust in the state of Maryland. So tell us how it was different from what Megan and Bettina shared, what sets it apart, and were there legislative and municipal hurdles you faced along the way?
Sure. I think part of the challenge is that the entity as founded doesn't exist in that form anymore. As I said in my brief introduction, Frederick County Affordable Housing Land Trust was the first land trust in Maryland, and it was formed in direct partnership and really led by the Habitat for Humanity affiliate. So we had a really good setup of pro bono attorney help to set up all the documents to follow, as John was talking about in 2010, all of that initial land trust legality that needed to be put in place to get it approved in the first place. And so we had the director of housing for the county on our governor's board at that point. We had hired an executive director exclusively for the land trust. And then that changed. People left positions. The staff turned over. This is more in the sort of 2015 into the pandemic years. And then the pandemic exacerbated that. So the land trust has always been there and always been looking not so much for just land, but for rehab properties. That's really where the base of our land trust preservation of affordability happened, was buying at reduced cost or having been donated, housing that already existed, and then using the volunteer strength of the Habitat affiliate to do the rehab that was needed and then sell to a homeowner who was interested and willing to sort of pay that forward and make it a lasting affordability purchase and sale. And we have a 99-year land trust agreement that we sign with folks. So the 7 individual properties are around the county. And because we haven't had the amount of property owners to satisfy our original founding documents, we haven't yet put together the community piece of the land trust. Once we hit, I believe it's 15 homeowners, then we will need to put together a governing board that has the community, the home owning membership, the Habitat membership, and hopefully at that point, county and city membership, but we're not quite there yet. And what we're looking at right now, and I should say this is true for probably everybody, as Frederick County is the fastest growing county in Maryland, land prices are through the roof. So it's made financial sense to look at rehabbing properties versus trying to build from scratch, which is what we are trying to do with, somebody described this to me as strange little parcels of land that other developers aren't going to want to develop. And we're in conversations with the county and the city for some of those, hopefully in the near term. What we're doing right now is, again, it's the first in the state. And I think sometimes there's a growing pain associated with being the first of anything, especially when there isn't really the living history of people that were on staff when decisions were made initially. I'm sure everybody experiences that to some extent. The condominium land trust, which is the project we're working on right now, also the first in the state, required legislation to be changed. And that was a thunderclap if anybody heard it, but at least the power is still on. Once we put that together, we'll be able to put together the protocols and the processes so that the next one is that much easier. I think that still a challenge, and it's not just, this isn't just for us, is to explain to prospective home buyers what a land trust really is. That's particularly true for us anyway, for the condominiums, because you're getting a reduced rate, reduced interest rate, so forth. But persuading people that it's worth it to pay that forward with a shared equity model, and making sure that they know they're not sharing the equity with Habitat, they're sharing it with the prospective home buyer when the property is resold, has also been really important in getting people to agree that this is something that they want to be part of, not just because of the home, but because of that sense of paying it forward and keeping not only affordability, but keeping people with low to moderate incomes in the neighborhood. That's particularly true in our downtown Frederick project, which is the historic Black part of Frederick, which was very run down, and now it's going to be affordable in perpetuity. So I don't know that any of those are particularly unique to us, except maybe the foundational moment in time when, 2010, 2011, we kind of came out of the box with an affiliate and a land trust. And I think, honestly, we're still figuring it out, and sort of wish we had a community land trust locally that we could lean on instead of kind of doing it all ourselves, to be honest. But we're getting there.
Thank you, Darby. I appreciate the different parts of the journey that all three panelists are on. So hopefully there's some co-learning happening here as well. My next question is, knowing, and it's an open question for any of you three panelists, knowing the journey you're on, what would you say are current strengths and challenges for affordable housing practitioners that are looking to partner or participate in a coalition with CLTs? And Darby, you already shared some of your growing pains, and so I would love to hear from Martina and Megan as well.
Yeah, I'd say I'd say the strength, our strength in our partnership with Proud Ground, it's really, all about relationships. And the thing that has been, I think, why we've been successful, and I think our partnership will continue as long as the Proud Ground and Habitat Portland are around, is because we have staff working together on all levels of the organization. So we have frontline staff. Every transaction that we do, we build the home, we get the buyers, but when we go to sell, we do that with Proud Ground, right? We do our mortgage education, our home ownership education in conjunction with Proud Ground. So staff from Proud Ground work with our buyers as well. They meet both folks from the Habitat affiliate and folks from the Land Trust in the process of buying their homes. and work with both staffs. The same for post-purchase. We have a strong post-purchase program. Proud Ground has a strong stewardship program. Homeowners can benefit from both, and we work together around what classes offered. And so we're always working really closely together. But then it goes up all levels of the organization, even so our CEO and the ED of Proud Ground work together a lot around strategy, around advocacy, both with the city and with the state. Our development teams work together. We support each other at all our fundraising events. So it's pretty much, I think what makes it successful is that we have these relationships and this partnership across the organization. So it's not just one team that works with Proud Ground. It's kind of everybody works with Proud Ground. And similarly on their end. So it takes a lot to maintain that. And when staff changes, we're always needing to update that. But I think that's one of the things that, because I'd say on the challenge is even though everything's in writing and we have MOUs, there is a lot of institutional knowledge, right? Katie Ulrich, who is Associate Director at Proud Ground, she and I put a lot of this together. So staff change could be, one of a challenge when you develop a partnership, but I think you just have to continue to keep working on it. So every quarter or at least 6 months or so, we do just meet and greets with the Proud Ground staff and Habitat Portland Region staff and make sure that we know each other on a personal level so that when there are concerns or issues that we need to work together through, we have that relationship already established. So that's what I would add.
That is magnificent, Martina. Thank you so much. One key question I received from practitioners about lasting affordability models is that it restricts wealth for homeowners. In the past few years, I've interviewed over 40 homeowners, and it actually kind of changed my understanding of wealth itself. So what has been your experience in having this conversation with homeowners?
I could answer that one. I feel like we've been doing lasting affordability for a long time, either through deed restrictions or CLT partnerships. And I think that people understand the idea of paying forward the opportunity they had. So our deed restriction model ties the increase in the value of the house to the median income in the area. So if incomes go up, then their house price can go up. And they're still gaining equity every time they make a mortgage payment. And they're building that strength and stability and self-reliance that comes from having your own place that you can put down roots. So most of our homeowners seem very willing to take that trade-off. And I do think it is helpful for wealth generation, even with a restriction on the resale price that keeps it affordable for the next buyer. People are still able to do things like go back to college or help their kids go to college because they're not at risk of their landlord selling their apartment or just the general instability that can come from rising rental costs over time.
That's helpful, Megan. And I think that cues me to ask Deb a question, who is a CLT partner with Habitat for a long time. So Deb, you've partnered with Habitat as a community land trust for the past 2 decades in the Valley. As a CLT partner, what are your expectations of affordable housing practitioners, and what is the role of stewardship in supporting homeowners post-purchase?
Well, the key, I think, is to make sure that our homeowners are successful in their homeownership experience. And a great way to ensure that is to be present, have a personal relationship, and build trust. So the opportunity for that comes during pre-purchase. That is when all your phone calls are going to be returned, and there's a lot of back and forthing. And so using that time to build a foundation with homeowners is really useful. With our Habitat partners, we have 2 developments with them, a total of 11 homes. Habitat does their own homebuyer education and such, and the Land Trust, we do our own homebuyer education and such. So they're getting 2 stewards. And we knew this going in, but honestly, through time, it has really proven to be a blessing. We've had changes in our executive directors, multiple over the last 20 years, and staffing, and our homeowners have always been able to call us. And what I've learned is that they want to have someone to call. And so we capitalize on the relationship we've built at pre-purchase and then continue to reinforce that we are indeed their advocate by responding, taking action, and being there at all times.
Thank you, Deb. Would Martina or Darby or Megan like to add something or respond to Deb?
I wanted to add something to the wealth question, Aditi, if that's okay.
Sure.
I wanted to say that when we started talking to homeowners about this, we did what a lot of affiliates have done, which is kind of a gradual transition to community land trust. Starting out, we increased it that you had to sell back to Habitat for the first 20 years, and there were income restrictions, and we sort of did a gradual transition to fully to permanent affordability. But when we were talking to folks about it, when I explained the model, most of the questions we got, and the biggest concern was being able to have their kids inherit the home. So that was the biggest concern. And what I found was, as long as that was, oh yes, of course, that's written right into the covenant or that's written into the ground lease, and here's where it says, this is how that works. For the most part, we didn't get additional pushback. So it was like, I want the stability, I want the security. And I do also understand how it can impact neighborhoods if homes are sold out of the land trust and can become rentals, rentals that are even owned by property owners out of state, and what that can do to neighborhoods. So I think folks understand that, but it's that issue of inheritance that seemed to really resonate. And if you can, at least for homeowners, that seemed to be the most important question to that wealth building. As long as their children could inherit the home, they were fine with the other restrictions. So that, in any way, that was our experience in Portland.
That has been a very wide myth, if that it cannot be transferred. And thank you for bursting that myth bubble. Darby or Megan, if you'd like to add something before we move on to the Q&A section of our session today.
I have actually a quick question for Dev, which is very quickly, you said that the types of preparation that the CLT and the Habitat affiliate do are different. Could you briefly say sort of how those things are different? Does it have to do, but anyway, how are those things complementary to each other?
Well, we both have the same mission, obviously, of creating an affordable home. The land is leased from the land trust, and so we have the ground lease documents that are legal documents. And so having homeowners attend a one-on-one session with us where we break down the terms of the ground lease, kitchen table style, is really important and a grand opportunity for that. And Martina, you're absolutely right about the question for inheritance, which we cover as well. At 23 years in, we have data at this point to show that there is wealth creation in the model. So it's not a hypothetical anymore. And so now when we present to communities and anyone else, that slide is also included.
Thank you. We have many questions, guys, from the participants. So just so that we head to the questions, I'll float these. There are around, I think, 15 questions right now, and I'm gonna pose 2 of them to this group, and by raise of hands, whoever wants to answer it, or I may direct. So the first question is, have any of the CLTs had the building owner constructing a housing unit for affordable rentals, and then the CLT actually manages the rental units as a landlord? Have you noticed this type of model either in your CLT or what your partners offer?
We're not doing it because at Habitat, our affiliate, we're really focused on home ownership, but there are other organizations in our area that are working on that. There's a Valley Housing Co-op, which is a limited equity cooperative that's partnering with a community land trust on a project. So that's an example of trying to blend those models out here in Western Massachusetts.
Okay, so as we wrap this up, in the follow-up email, we'll have panelists' contacts, and so you know whom to talk to after. The second question is, how does the partnership between Habitat for Humanity affiliates and local CLTs help support the operations of each? I think some of you mentioned a few things. Revenue for operations is such a key issue for CLTs, especially smaller ones, they say. So whoever wants to answer from the panel.
I can support that. I mean, I can answer on how we do it. We actually support Proud Ground with fees for each transaction. So, and then our buyers also, it's sort of, when we started working with them, it doubles the number of folks who are paying a lease fee every month to the trust. So they had twice the number of owners, and that makes a difference to the bottom line either. But that's all something that we worked out in an MOU. They have fees that need to be paid as part of their transactions, and we do support Proud Ground with that. So,
thank you, Martina. And Dev, you were responding as well.
You and I talked about the 1/8 of the foreclosure rate for land trust during the Great Recession. That actually put us in a position where the cities wanted to give us operating funds in order to provide stewardship. So stewardship fees are now a thing. And what I've noticed with our Habitat, when we do have a crisis situation, that we can bring both of our teams together. That's twice, the subject matter expertise between the staff, the board, and our linkages. And so that is just a simple way to double the amount of resources, if you will, that are being supported from different funding sources, including ground leases and stewardship fees.
Thank you.
We also have some overlapping volunteers. So we have volunteers who go work, retired architects, working for both the Land Trust and Habitat. So sometimes it is just being cooperative when it's at a small scale like us.
Yeah, I would also say that advocacy is another key thing. I mean, we're both the joint power of advocacy for homeownership funds, and not just homeownership funds, but permanently affordable models. So Proud Ground and Habitat work closely together to promote advocacy that's going to support permanently affordable homeownership throughout the state, and we've been very successful in doing that. And so that continues to, bring us revenue that supports home building.
Thank you. That brings us to a close. Thank you, everybody, for participating in this amazing discussion. We hit so many points about wealth building, about retaining subsidy in the homes, post-purchase support, and just the kind of stages everybody is in this work. So thank you for sharing all your insights. And for joining us today. We are excited to see the growing momentum behind this work. Community land trusts have been evolving for the past 50 years, and it's inspiring to witness how partnerships like those between CLTs and Habitat for Humanity are helping to take this model even further. There's so much more we can do to scale lasting affordability in creative and community-rooted ways. If you'd like to stay connected, ask a question, or share a thought, please feel free to reach out to Assan Sosseh directly. Yes, we'll be sharing his email in our follow-up email to you. We'll be sharing his contact, and along with a link to a brief follow-up survey, we would love to hear from you. As a follow-up to this discussion, we'll be also sharing the Lincoln Institute's report on partnerships that explores models like these in greater depth. We hope it inspires newer collaborations and ideas. This webinar is just one step in deepening our shared learning. We'll publish more resources on lasting affordability soon, so keep an eye out. And this session, after the session, you'll be receiving access to the recording, complete with high-quality captions that can be automatically translated to your preferred language. And before we go, Please take a moment to complete the short exit survey that will pop up on the session when the session ends. Ben will administer that. And your feedback is incredibly valuable in helping us improve any future offerings. So please click that button and let us know how you what you thought about this experience and presentation. Again, immense thank you to the International Center for Community Land Trust, Habitat for Humanity International, and Lincoln Institute for Land Policy for sponsoring this important conversation. Thanks again. We look forward to staying in touch. Thank you. Bye.